catastrophe, misfortune, or terrorism, it becomes more apparent that American politics has turned into a game of moral grandstanding. After 26 were killed in the Texas church shooting that occurred several weeks ago, the left was quick to blame the tragedy on gun-loving conservatives who supposedly enabled the shooting through their refusal to support stricter gun control. This is obviously a baseless claim with no goal other than to shift responsibility to the other side. By portraying your political opposition as heartless, morally indifferent, and generally incompetent, it increases the polarization between the two political sides, which causes incidents like this to occur in the first place. However, because of the left's claim to moral superiority and their tendency to present practical approaches to issues of inequality, crime, and injustice, they appeal more to intellectuals and academics. Enter Ben Shapiro, a Jewish, Harvard-educated, conservative lawyer, author, debater, and talk show host. Shapiro, who currently hosts The Ben Shapiro Show, the most popular conservative podcast in America, has attracted many followers for his ability to analyze and debunk points of hypocrisy from both the left and the right. What helps Shapiro stand out from other traditional conservative voices is his resentment towards political correctness. Not quite at the level of Milo or Lauren Southern, but still to the point where he is by no means afraid to use inflammatory dialogue to get his point across.
Disrespect. Okay, forget about the disrespect. Facts don't care about your feelings. It turns out that every chromosome, every cell in Caitlyn Jenner's body is male with the exception of some of his sperm cells. It turns out that his brain structure is male. It turns out that he still has all of his male appendages. How he feels on the inside is irrelevant to the question of his biological sex.
I don't agree with that.
What Ben does best, in my opinion, is he draws attention to certain ideas of the left. For example, the widely controversial topic of white privilege, and completely dismantles the argument by explaining the fallacies and inconsistencies within it.
Whites are not born with a genetic predisposition to doing the right responsible thing. They're not born into an arbitrary moral system that only benefits whites. There are 3 simple life rules, actually. If you want to avoid permanent poverty in the United States, according to the Brookings Institute, which is the left-leaning institute, you only have to do 3 things to avoid permanent poverty in the United States. Very simple. Graduate high school, get a job, don't have babies before you're married. That's it. So here's the truth, okay? There is certain privilege, but it's what I like to call decision privilege. Certain decisions are going to privilege you and your children. You're going to have a better life if you pay attention to these things, and they're things that are in your control or in your control on behalf of your children. For example, it turns out the greatest privilege in American life is not white privilege. You want to talk about being born into privilege. The greatest privilege in American life is being born into a 2-parent family. And that's true for every race. This has nothing to do with race.
Not only does he remove all credibility from such arguments, he also provides comprehensive solutions by observing the reality of the problem.
You walk into a place and you say, I want you to cater my same-sex wedding, and therefore you're victimized by American society. If the religious store owner says no, you're not a victim because that person has no duty to serve you. Just as the gay baker has no duty to serve the Westboro Baptist Church annual function. Guess what? If someone discriminates against you, there's another bakery right across the street. Take your business there, and you can put the other bakery out of business.
The reason that this is so dangerous for the left is because these ideas, or more specifically misconceptions, are what the liberals use to appeal to certain groups of so-called oppression. They do this effectively and efficiently. People want to be victims. Blaming someone else is much easier than accepting responsibility for one's own actions. The left realizes this and capitalizes on it. This is why the ideology of Ayn Rand has been completely ostracized from academia as a radical and inherently immoral viewpoint. The absurdity of the idea of individual responsibility is shunned and disregarded as inconsiderate to the well-being of a society as a whole. This culture of victimhood, crafted and inflated by the left, directly ties in with their efforts to achieve moral superiority. And by propagating the illusion that they are catering to the epidemic of victimization of the lower class, minorities, women, etc., it earns them the following of quality, fine-minded people, not just those of little political knowledge. But when these same people are exposed to the rhetoric of speakers like Ben Shapiro, their moral principles are challenged because it is much harder for them to dismiss the rational arguments of these intellectual heavyweights as psychobabble or partisan discourse. For this reason, the left is losing credibility amongst some of its loyal members. Not to say that Ben is solely responsible for this de-alignment, but he is certainly contributing a great deal to the magnitude at which it occurs. Shapiro has also drawn much controversy around his frequent campus lectures, as many have resulted in protest, riots, or cancellation. Oftentimes, the theme of his lecture is free speech, so ironically, the eruption of these protests at free speech lectures does nothing but characterize the protesters as incompetent and closed-minded. Through the left's refusal to engage Shapiro in fair and civil discourse, it portrays Ben and his following as the more reasonable side, and draws even more attention to his messages and ideas. Those who do agree to debate him are rarely able to combat Shapiro's political fluency and extensive historical knowledge.
Why not just secure the border and then put a pathway to citizenship in?
Why can't those happen at the same time?
Why don't you answer my question instead of asking me back why? I just explained to you why they can't. Here's why they can't happen at the same time. As you secure the border remains somewhat open. People cross the border because they feel that if they get in before the deadline, if they get in before the border is secure, then they are somehow included in the pathway to citizenship. Of course I've read the bill. And not only have I read the bill, I've been watching what's happening on the border with tens of thousands of children crossing the border in anticipation of amnesty.
Wait, because we have
what do you think is happening?
There's no law right now.
As Shapiro continues to speak, the more prominent he becomes, and the more the left will try to oppose him. As the left increases their resistance using nothing but hostile and uncivilized tactics, Ben Shapiro becomes more credible. This is a dangerous cycle for the left to engage in, but they will continue to do so long as Shapiro presents valid and rational arguments. Ben Shapiro is not just hated on the left. The far right, for some of the same aforementioned reasons, despises him as well. Though his positions on foreign policy or religious truth may not be held with the same reverence as that on, say, economic freedom, it is undeniable that Shapiro's overall message has shed light on the falsehoods fabricated by the left. For this reason, the rise of Shapiro, as well as many other intellectually honest figures, will be ultimately detrimental to the left's agenda.
You have to speak the language of morality. You must speak the language of morality. The left wins because nobody on the left knows anything about politics. They know you're evil. That's it. They know you're a racist, sexist, bigot, homophobe who hates the poor. Right? That's what they know about you. And it's not they think that about you. They know that about you. Deep down, they know all these evil things about you, which is why Thanksgiving dinners are always so awkward if you're unfortunate to have Jewish relatives or you have friends on the left, which are the exact same focus group. The answer to all of this is to speak in the language of morality. This is why I never say the government compels people to do stuff. The government does not compel people to do stuff. The government compels people to do stuff at point of gun. Why do I say that? Because leftists are scared of guns. Right? When we say the government compels things, people say, oh, well, compulsion. Well, that's just like taxes, right? No. That's somebody coming to your house in the middle of the night with a SWAT team, with a gun, pointing it at you and dragging you off to prison for not doing what they want. Right? That is what we are facing. Right? When it comes to the left, it's not, when we're such idiots, honestly. We were constantly arguing about whether our tax program is more efficient than their tax program. It's not about efficiency. Barack Obama gave the right answer to the wrong question, right? When he was asked in 2008, would you raise the capital gains tax, even if it means less revenue to the government? Would you raise it? He said yes, for purposes of fairness. Right? Even if it meant people were more impoverished, even if it meant people were more poor, the answer was yes, for purposes of fairness. Why? Because people don't speak the language of poverty. People don't speak the language of efficiency. People don't speak Mitt Romney's 57-point tax plan. You can't even name 2 points on his 57-point tax plan. People speak the language of fairness and justice and morality. They want to think that they're right and the other guy is wrong. They want to have a feeling of, in many cases, unearned moral superiority based on their opposition to things. This is why everybody was getting off ripping on Donald Sterling for being a crazy old racist coot. Did they accomplish anything? No. But they felt real good because they got to go around telling all their friends that Donald Sterling was a racist old coot. Right? This is what they do. So, speak their language. In other words, next time they say something like, I believe in the minimum wage, then you should say, why exactly is it that you want to put a gun to the head of a business owner and force them to pay something? Why is that okay? Why isn't that violative of basic principles of consent? Like you over here, you like gay marriage because you say that 2 men should be able to wed each other, but those 2 men shouldn't be able to do business with each other in a mutually agreed relationship? So if instead of them having sex, they were actually just, one was signing a check to the other to paint his car, then you're saying that's not okay? And that you're going to take a gun and put it to the head of one of them in order to make that happen? It's because you're a totalitarian. Right? This is the truth. The left is totalitarian. You don't have to feel bad about saying these things. And when you talk about the inefficiencies of the left's social policies in the inner city, who gives a crap? This is really, I mean, honestly, that no one in the inner city is thinking about, wow, you know, this really is not very efficient. What they're thinking is there are a bunch of Tea Party, Ku Klux Klanners out there who are going to invade their inner city and burn down their houses. Why do they think that? Because they're Democrats and apparently some Republicans, Dad Cochran, who actually have been doing this sort of stuff, have been saying this sort of stuff. The answer to that is that the real racists are and always have been folks on the left who wish to exploit racial division in order to pay off their cronies. The reason the education system sucks in the inner city is because the left wants to pay off its union buddies at the expense of black kids. The reason that the left has not done anything for the inner cities despite years of dominance in Detroit, the reason is because they wanted the violence. And it is about intent. It's not about effect. There's a really telling point in the 2012 election cycle when Bill Clinton was talking about Obama, and he said, the difference between Obama and Mitt Romney is that Romney is somebody who says that Barack Obama's done a really poor job. Barack knows he hasn't done a great job, but he feels really bad about it. This was an actual line, right? And people bought that because, and the polls show this, right? 80% of people thought that Mitt Romney cared less about them than Barack Obama in exit polls. 80%. That's a majority of Republicans. Right? But when it came to policies, they agreed with Mitt Romney. But people don't vote with their heads, people vote with their hearts. So, go after what people feel. Go after the language of morality. Socialism is not a good idea that went wrong, and whenever you hear Republicans or conservatives say this, it's because they have the IQ of a kumquat. Socialism was a horribly evil idea that went completely right. It went exactly as they thought it was going to go. This was the design from the start. Socialism is a fundamentally immoral, evil, unfair, discriminatory, and disgusting system that violates off the bat 3 of the 10 commandments, right? You don't steal, God, not government, and you shouldn't be jealous of your neighbor's ass, right? That's in the actual language, correct?
Yes.
Not the Bill Clinton language. So, these are the terms that we should be speaking. These are the terms that hit young people. Because young people nobody has the time to read all of the entire editorial page of the Wall Street Journal. Nobody does. Everybody's attention span is 5 seconds long. So if you can't make people feel good about being conservative, make them feel really, really bad about being leftist. Deserve to feel bad about being leftist.